Some news coming out of Minnesota and Utah working on a deal for point guards. We'll get into that. J.J. Redick news. According to a tweet from a Clipper beat reporter, J.J. Redick is now interested in joining the Rockets if the finances work. You think the Rockets can clear out some room for Redick? They'd have to add another player, though, so Redick wouldn't just be enough. But he's still going to look at the Sixers and the Nets. We'll get the latest, some opinions from NBA writer Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com, who always brings great information at Alex Kennedy NBA on Twitter. He's got another really good story that we'll dive into as well. But let's first, Alex, take a look at some of the stories. First, Gerald Henderson waived by the Sixers. What message does that move kind of send that they decide to part ways with, a veteran player that they kind of brought in to help stabilize the organization and bring a veteran guy in, but them cutting ties with him? What's the message there?
Well, it was a money decision. They basically had to make that decision today. Had they, kept him, his contract would have been guaranteed for next season for $9 million. So it's the difference between, having that open roster spot, being able to bring in another veteran who's relatively cheap, and having him at $9 million. The Bulls have a similar situation with Rajon Rondo. And, they've talked about trading him or waiving him as well.
He has been released, by the way, with Cannon.
Yeah, so they had the same decision to make. He would have been on the books for $13 million. Basically, it was the option. That it was just a date they had to make that decision. So, they were trying to shop Rajon Rondo throughout the day to trade him. Every team knew that that's what they were trying to do. So you have to attach a pick or something like that to move a contract like that. So they ended up waiving Rondo, and Henderson is the same way. So now you're going to see them go after another veteran probably, or several veterans. We've seen that Brian Colangelo wants to have veterans around this young core. He believes that's important for the development. So I think you're going to see them replace someone like Henderson, but just paying him $9 million seems like it's a bit too much.
So that opens up the opportunity, though. Not that the Sixers have cap issues, but it kind of, I guess, opens up the opportunity for them to overpay for a guy if they really like somebody that they want to lure there.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that's exactly what they tried to do last summer. I mean, they talked to a number of guys last summer about signing huge contracts whenever the money was there. They had a ton of cap space, obviously, but also you had the league, league wide, you had a ton of cap space just because of the TV deal. So last year they talked to Jamal Crawford about a $20 million deal for 1 year. They talked to Manu Ginobili. At one point, they talked to Jamal Crawford and Rajon Rondo, actually, about coming in together. There was a lot of really strange discussions that happened last year. The Rondo one, that was something that I think there was a schism within the front office about whether they should bring in Rondo. But I know if Crawford came on board, he wanted another veteran to be alongside of him. But yeah, I mean, this is an organization that wants to have veterans in place around their young guys because, they feel like veterans are so important to have in the locker room, and they can also help on the court, in terms of developing these guys and making them better players. So don't be surprised if you see, a 1 year crazy offer to one of these veterans, even if it's the guy that's much older. A guy like Manu Ginobili, no one was offering him the kind of money that the Sixers were last summer because they knew, he was at the tail end of his career. But these guys are for the Sixers to land one of these guys, that's what it takes. You have to make that huge offer because a guy's giving away a year of his prime, a year of potentially contending on a championship team to go play there and be a mentor, basically. J.J. Redick's name has come up. They would have to offer him just a ton of money to make it worthwhile for him. Brooklyn's come up for J.J. Redick as well. They're kind of in the same boat where, they're having to overpay for guys. When you're a team that's young like that and you're trying to, grab one of these veterans, you're making some, really, really big offers. And it's usually not a long-term deal, which is why it's not very risky. The Jamal Crawford deal, for example, they talked about a 1 year, $20 million deal last summer. I believe they talked about a 2-year deal that was maybe worth a little bit less each year. But it's a short-term deal that, allows for a strong locker room presence to be there while these guys develop. So I think, that's something that we've seen this organization be willing to do. And I think you're going to see some more of that as free agency, approaches and continues this year.
Let me get your opinion on this, Alex. Something we talked about earlier in the show. Has free agency changed in the minds of the players and the agents now? Like, what is attractive to free agents? Before it seemed like, a winning team would draw a free agent or, obviously money is up there. But, you see like Blake Griffin interested in Phoenix and J.J. Redick might be interested in Philadelphia. Some teams interested in Minnesota. It seems that a winning team or a winning culture maybe isn't at the top of that list as much anymore as, hey, do you have talent? Like, can I come there because I like your talent more so than, hey, you won 42 games and you seem like you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it's really weird. It all really depends on the player from what I've seen. Some guys prioritize winning. Some guys will take, way less money to go to a winner. You look at a guy like David West, for example, that just won a championship. He took, $20 million less to go play for San Antonio and then Golden State to ultimately win a championship. There are plenty of examples of guys like that. And not just guys that took minimum contracts either. Guys that left money on the table to go, to a chance to be on a contender, not a loaded super team like the Warriors. There are certain guys that do that. There are certain guys that say, I have maybe 10 years in the NBA at best because I have a very short window to earn as much money as possible. So I'm taking as much money as I can. I talk to players who have that mentality that say, I'm not, a musician or an actor. I can't work until I'm 60. I can't work until I'm 70. I need to go make as much money as I possibly can during this small window. So if a team makes me an offer, whether they're a small market, whether they're bad, it doesn't really matter. I'm taking the money. Players have told me that before. And then there's certain players that are attracted to certain things. Some guys want their own team. They want to be able to be the star. And typically I notice that with younger players, they want to have their own team and show that they've, kind of made it and that they're the number one or number two option. I think with younger guys, it's typically showing that you can. First of all, any young guy wants to stick in the NBA and just make sure that you're around. The next step is showing, okay, I'm a significant piece or I'm a star player. Then I think as guys get later in their career, it's about making sure your finances are right. You want to make sure you make as much money as possible. And then I think when you get to the tail end of the career, that's when it's like, okay, I've shown what I can do. I have the individual accolades. I've, gotten, paid a pretty good amount throughout my career. Maybe I can go chase a championship, or now let's focus on winning. And some of that's maturity too. Some of that is, I don't want to be on a team that's really young anymore. That was one thing that, David West and Andre Iguodala, they talked about after they won the championship this year. They said that, it wasn't about chasing a ring as much as it was, I don't want to be on a team with a bunch of young guys that are bickering over their role and who gets the touches and, what to do that night and go out clubbing. At a certain point, you want to be around guys that are your age and are focused on the same things as you too. So to answer your question, I think it depends on the guy. I think it depends on the guy's age. But guys certainly have different priorities. A guy like Blake Griffin has very different priorities than a guy like, say J.J. Redick or David West. It just really, really depends.
Good stuff. Alex Kennedy here from hoopshype.com. One of the things, too, it seems that guys want to play with their friends, too, right? I mean, agents, they introduce these guys. It's something that wasn't as prevalent 10 years ago where agents introduced these guys before they were even playing in the league. That's something that's rather new, too, because Blake Griffin doesn't really – I mean, other than he might know Devin Booker or through an agent or something, like that team doesn't seem like it would be a fit for him.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up too. That's the big thing. So players want to be, on the same team as their friends. And I think there's two reasons for that. You have AAU culture where these guys from a very young age are taken out of high school or sometimes even, eighth grade, and they're traveling the country and playing these AAU circuits. They're playing competitive basketball from a very young age. So the guys that they become closest to are their peers, the guys that are ranked, 5-star recruits, the guys that are at the same tournaments as them. And then also you have the off-season workout facilities. the guys that train at Impact Basketball in Las Vegas, the guys that train together in Los Angeles, the guys that train together here in in Florida, where I'm based out of. Those are the relationships that become very valuable in free agency and very important. It was funny. There was a few years ago, the Toronto Raptors, they put together a team that had like 7 or 8 guys that had all worked out together at Impact Basketball. And it was one of those things that, you wouldn't really notice if you were a casual fan or even a fan of the Raptors, but just being someone that goes out to Vegas every year for Summer League, I started looking at that roster, and I'm like, wow, these guys have played pickup together almost every summer for the last 3 or 4 years. It makes a lot of sense that they came together. So there's that, too. You have friendships that develop from the AAU level, from off-season workouts, from agency relationships. Those things definitely play a factor. And I think now what you're seeing, too, is markets matter less. That's one thing that I forgot to mention, too. I think as social media kind of makes the world smaller, you don't need to go to Los Angeles or New York to be, a superstar and to get a ton of attention. A guy like Kevin Durant, for example, in Oklahoma City, led the league in commercials and endorsement deals. If you're an attractive player, if you're a guy that has a game that attracts fans, and you're talented, you're going to be found. You're going to get a big endorsement deal. A guy like Damian Lillard can have a huge endorsement deal from Adidas in Portland. You're going to be on national TV if your team is good enough and you're good enough. So I think that things have definitely changed in those regards. Guys want to play with friends. There's a lot more of that happening. Markets matter a bit less. And then you have, guys at different stages in their career pursuing different things based on what their priorities are.
Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com. By the way, a trade just went down. Alex Rubio is heading to Utah for a first-round pick. It looks like it's top 14 protected. It looked like Minnesota was just trying to do anything they could to get Rubio out of there, and I would assume they would now become someone to watch for a Drew Holiday or Kyle Lowry or a George Hill starting tonight at midnight.
Yeah, it's interesting because, earlier today, there were reports coming out of Utah that Gordon Hayward was saying that George Hill was kind of, it was a huge part of his decision, that he really wanted Utah to bring George Hill back, and that was a big part of his free agency decision. So that's interesting to me that they are now moving on to Ricky Rubio. It really kind of makes me wonder, okay, do they think that Rubio's better than George Hill, and that's going to keep Gordon Hayward? Or do they feel like, okay, George Hill wanted a max contract. He was injured all year. He was probably going to leave anyway. Gordon Hayward's probably going to leave, so let's replace him with Rubio. And then does that, make us assume that Gordon Hayward is going somewhere like Boston or Miami? That's kind of the question. But you're right, Minnesota now does become a place to kind of look. They're in win-now mode. They just brought in Jimmy Butler, obviously. I think they think Towns and Wiggins are ready to take that next step. And I think they're attractive to a number of point guards. If you're Kyle Lowry, if you are, one of these guys that are available, Jeff Teague, George Hill, you may look at that situation and say, I'm going to be surrounded by weapons and be able to go win there. So I think they're going to be able to attract a point guard there. But it makes me wonder what Utah's thinking right now. Is this them kind of waving the white flag that Gordon Hayward is going to leave, or is this them trying to, bolster that point guard position? Does Hayward like Ricky Rubio, and this is them trying to keep him happy? That's kind of the big question, in my opinion.
Alex Kennedy with us as everyone tries to connect the dots leading up to free agency that starts tonight at 12:01. Alex, what about Andre Iguodala? There's some reports that he won't even meet with Golden State.
Yeah, well, the problem there is that, they're in a tough situation money-wise that for someone like Andre Iguodala, he's going to get such large offers from other teams. There's a ton of contending teams that want him, obviously, but then there's a ton of teams that are up and coming that want him in the locker room. Even team like Philly, has been mentioned about Iguodala just because he's the perfect guy to have in the locker room and he can contribute on the court. So he's going to draw some huge offers. And I think it's gotten to the point now where Golden State realizes that they may not be able to keep him. Before there was talk that maybe Kevin Durant could take a little bit less money here or there. Maybe there could be some discounts had so that they could keep the core together. But I think now they realize that Iguodala is going to get so much money offered to him that it just isn't going to make sense to be able to keep him. And then it makes sense when you look at their luxury tax number. You know, if you're a team like Golden State, you really have to focus on keeping the superstars together, the guys like Durant, Curry, Thompson, and Green together, because if you start hitting that repeater luxury tax, which is something that comes into effect when you're, hitting the luxury tax year after year, that's when it becomes almost impossible to field this kind of team. And it was put in place for this very reason, because owners didn't want a super team like this to be able to form. So, it's really interesting. It's interesting to me that he's not meeting with the Warriors, because it does tell me that there is a limit to this Warrior spending. I think some people around the NBA were kind of concerned. They looked at Golden State and thought, okay, these are Silicon Valley guys. Maybe they're willing to dip into their pockets and just spend, and there's no real limit to their spending, and they're going to do whatever they can to keep everyone in place. This kind of shows that, they are afraid of that repeater luxury tax, and that it may not be as easy to keep this team together as everyone kind of assumed it would be throughout the season, throughout the postseason. And then, that definitely has a trickle effect too. Klay Thompson is a free agent in 2019. You're already hearing that Paul George has contacted Klay Thompson about possibly playing together wherever Paul George goes. George was talking about them teaming up together in Los Angeles, where Klay Thompson's dad obviously played and is an announcer. So there's trickle effects. You look at all these moves and then you kind of wonder what it means and connect the dots, as you said. So to me, that's a big deal, because it says Iguodala is probably gone, which is a huge loss for the Warriors, because he's, big for them on and off the court. It tells me that Iguodala is going to be able to join another team, and that's a big gain for another team. And then it just tells me that down the road, this Warriors team may not be able to keep this core together for as long as everyone thinks. And then if you're a team like, Cleveland or Boston or San Antonio, that's a great sign. And if you're one of these up-and-coming cores like a Philly or a Milwaukee or a Minnesota, that's an even better sign, because that means 4 or 5 years from now, this team could be in trouble, this team could be breaking up, and then that's when it's your time to really shine.
All this movement that's going to involve several $1 million. And, Alex, you wrote an excellent piece at hoopshype.com about Antoine Walker. He went bankrupt after earning $108 million in the NBA. Now he's trying to help others learn from his mistake. It's sadly a very common situation in the NBA, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common situation, and that's one of the reasons why Antoine Walker kind of stepped in and he teamed up with Morgan Stanley and basically formed a financial education program for NFL players, NBA players, and collegiate athletes. And what he does is he kind of walks them through, okay, here's how much money you're going to lose in taxes. Here's how you should budget. Here's how you should save. Here's how you should handle your family and friends. He talks about how he was so stupid with his money, buying ridiculous cars, buying jewelry, buying multiple houses, and he's the first one to admit that he handled his money poorly. He had $108 million from his NBA contracts alone, and then within a year and a half of leaving the NBA, he was bankrupt and lost his NBA championship ring. The Miami Heat ended up giving him another one, actually, because he lost his through the bankruptcy. He lost everything, and it was interesting to kind of talk to him about that, and it was a really hard time for him. There was a 3-year period there where he had no money, and it was this whole long, drawn-out process of them kind of going through his assets. And now he's in a position where he's kind of at peace. He's now debt-free. Creditors are no longer calling him. So what he's done is he and Bart Scott, who played for the Baltimore Ravens and New York Jets, they now have formed this entertainment and athlete division at Morgan Stanley, where they talk to these younger athletes and just field their questions and make sure they understand where their money's going, who's around them. Because a lot of times these guys have financial advisors or agents or people in their lives that they don't necessarily know everything about. And that's really scary, because, these guys are handling their money and, making big decisions for them. So he's trying to turn his negative story into a positive story and help other players avoid the mistakes that he made. And I think it's a really cool thing that he's doing. A lot of people wouldn't be willing to go out there and, discuss the 3 years of their lives that, or of their life that was, so stressful and the low point for them. But, here he is going out, talking to people about it and trying to use it as a teaching, lesson, teaching experience. And it's worked. He's reached over 5,000 athletes so far. He says that, after every single one of his sessions, guys pull him aside and ask specific questions or get his phone number so they can follow up and talk to him about stuff and ask questions down the road. So it seems to be working. And I think it's a great sign for athletes because, these guys, again, they have such a small window where they can earn their money. He wants to make sure that guys make sure that they're set for life whenever they're done playing and they're not in his same position where they're bankrupt or they're running out of money or they're hurting.
You can read the full article at hoopshype.com. Follow Alex on Twitter at AlexKennedyNBA. It's a really interesting piece, as my producer just typed to me. This sounds like Ballers, the TV show, that they run on HBO. It's a little bit reminiscent of that. And NBA free agency begins in just about 7 hours from now. And I know Alex will be keeping your eye on that, and we'll probably recap it all coming up next week. Enjoy the weekend, and happy 4th to you, pal.
Thanks a lot. You too. Take care.